And I'll ask Louis to begin the response, followed by Janice and then Paul. This is the preamble to this question on addressing poverty globally. Our churches believe that every person is created in the image of God, and therefore it is God's desire that no person should feel hungry. To address global hunger, 15 Canadian church denominations are partnering in the Canadian Food Grains Bank. The farmers of Ridges-Markham are perhaps the largest donors of crops to the Canadian Food Grains Bank on a per capita basis. Our town also partners with Igoma, Tanzania, and this month organized a Food for Thought fundraiser. CBM, a major Christian relief agency, is located in town. And the Give a Day to World AIDS movement also has its roots in Stouffville. In short, meeting the challenge of global hunger and investing in international development is of concern in this community. The UN member states, including Canada, agreed on 8 UN Millennium Development Goals to be reached by the year 2015. These goals reflect integral values of the churches: to feed the hungry, care for the sick, and strive for justice for the oppressed. Here is the question: what commitment will you and your party make to help Canada become a leader in meeting the Millennium Development Goals? Louis, we begin with you.
First and foremost, we should continue giving to the needy people across the world. We've got to continue giving food to those that need it across the world. We have to support, and we do support, the 0.7% of giving to those that are in need. There are many people that go hungry, not only in Canada, but also around the globe. And our position is that we've got to support not only the Canadian people that need it, but also in other parts of the world. I was fortunate to be able to go to Nunavut and to the Northwest Territories, and when we landed with my wife Loretta, believe me, after meeting with a number of people in Nunavut, we both tried some of the difficulties that they're having obtaining food in Canada. So we have an issue not only globally but also locally.
Thank you. Janice.
We need to look after the whole world. We're one family, and where there's injustice one place or poverty one place, it will affect us. We want to immediately increase the overseas development assistance to 0.7% of GDP. Sorry, I have to check my numbers carefully. I want to tell the truth. Which will mean $500 million more money in each year. But, it's not just about feeding people. The concept of being helpful to those in need has really evolved over the last 200 years, and I think churches have been at the forefront of that. It used to be hand out bags of rice and water, and they said, teach the person how to farm. But I think the best quote I read was just before this election from the leader of Carol's, who said, these people don't need to learn how to fish. They're the best fishermen in the world. They want their water back. Because looking at the reasons for poverty and making real efforts to remediate those reasons and to fix the injustices in the world, the fact that we're all rich and have 2 cars off the backs of the rest of the civilized world, we need to look at the global tar sands, for example, and the effects that Canadian made in Canada for climate change is having on Africa, on Asia, and on the island states. And we need to cut the red tape and get medications from Canada into these other countries to deal with malaria and AIDS and with life-threatening diseases.
Thank you.
Since we were elected, of course, we refocused our CDA funding so that we could focus on food and medicines. And that's where Canada's commitments have been for international aid assistance. We were one of the first nations to actually meet our commitments to Africa. But when you talk specifically about the Millennium Development Goal, it's kind of difficult to talk about all of the successes that we've had with respect to all 8 of them. But what we heard before the last G8 meeting from the United Nations was that, in particular, the Millennium Development Goals 4 and 5, which are to reduce child mortality and improve maternal health, we had not been meeting those targets globally. That's what the G8 focused on, and I'm extraordinarily proud of the fact that Canada has committed $2.85 billion to both of those initiatives. We were very, very far behind on those 2 initiatives. And through the G8, we've been able to lead the world in making sure that newborn around the world in disadvantaged locations have the food and medicines that they need, that the mothers, before they give birth, have the education that they need, they have the resources that they need to actually deliver healthy babies. And we brought the whole world in this. The Prime Minister, of course, is chairing with the President of, I think it's, I'm going to have the country wrong, so I won't even say it. But the UN mandate to make sure that that these 2 Millennium Development Goals and the $2.85 billion that Canada has sponsored and that the rest of the world has sponsored gets to the people who actually need it. So we should be proud of that as Canadians, that we're actually getting the job done on the 2 networks.
Thank you very much. Time is up, and we'll go to Triple for your response, please.
One of the things that I want to bring to mind is that actions speak louder than words. And we know from the Markham government that they promised to make history, to make poverty history, and at the last minute they pulled out and weren't able to do so. The present government chose not to approve funding for Kairos, and that's disheartening to see as well. I certainly support making poverty history, and I wear my band proudly to show that support, and I will do everything within my power to ensure that we in the community do everything that we can to ensure that we do our best to improve poverty throughout the world. If I may read some of the policies here. The Green Party of Canada will work tirelessly to ensure that Canada meet the commitment to allocate 0.7% of GDP to overseas development assistance and meet the Millennium Development Goals. By offering this small amount of our GDP so we can help our world meet the most basic of goals: to make poverty history, reduce disease, foster democracy, and support ecologically sustainable economies. Specifically, the Green Party MPs will prioritize the restructuring of ODA delivery while making responsible and consistent increases that will achieve the target of 0.7% of GDP within a decade.
Very good, thank you. Time is up, John. We will go to you for your response, please.
Okay, what I would like to say is that our party actually supports the 0.7% of GDP actually needed to actually make sure that we actually alleviate the poverty around the world, but that's pretty much all the party actually says about it. So what I think we should actually do is to make sure that all the people around the world are protected. But the main reason why there's actually a lot of poverty is because all the policies are based on oil, and that's also driving food prices, in all countries around the world, and oil prices, and the prices of gas. So what we have to actually do is make some sort of policy, or adopt some sort of policy that actually helps to protect everybody in the world and actually have us a level playing field. And I also think what we need to do is to actually make sure that we give aid to areas that matter, and aid to the areas which have a lot of strife, which are especially poor countries that are also ravaged by war, disease, and that. I think what we actually need to do is also make sure that people in those countries are protected, and we should actually go there immediately whenever there's trouble in those areas. And I think that's what I would actually do as your member of parliament, for this area. And I actually think we actually need somebody who actually stands for those issues, because those issues aren't being talked about right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our fourth question on the topic of refugee policy, and John will ask you when we're just finished, we'll ask you to begin answering this question, followed by Janice and then Tricia. Refugee policy, the preamble is this. Our churches are compelled by Scripture to care for the homeless and the foreigner, hungry and thirsty. Consequently, all of our churches are involved with relief work overseas and in the opportunity of offering hospitality to newcomers and refugees to Canada. Today, there are more people who have been forcibly displaced from their homes than ever before, approximately 42 million. Yet at the same time, there's been a serious decline in the number of refugees admitted to Canada in the past years, as well as the number of family relocation migrants. This concerns us. Here's the question. How will you and your party uphold Canada's humanitarian and international obligation to provide protection to thousands of refugees every year? How will you ensure this is done? John, we begin with you.
Well, some of the ways we would actually make sure that there's protection for refugees is by actually going in, like, the regions that are actually displaced, and actually making sure that we actually send, peacekeepers in those areas. We actually want to make sure that people are actually, protecting the countries where there's actually like a conflict going on. But we actually think that we should actually re-engage like in the peacekeeping role, which Canada's actually done pretty well in. I don't think we should actually go into war, which is more like the American model. But what I think we should actually do is make sure that we send peacekeepers in areas that are actually ravaged, and help make sure that Canada actually goes among its peacekeeping role, so that all the all the key people in the areas that are actually having conflict are actually protected from war, disease, and strife. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Janice, please.
I think Dostoevsky said it best. It's easy to love mankind. It's hard to love someone who needs to sleep in your bed, right? So, I mean, it's easy in general, but hard when it's specific, real people knocking on our doors and saying they need help. And it seems in this country the safest place for refugees in a church. We see over and over the church is protecting people from being deported, and churches have to congratulate themselves for that. We need to crack down on the bad guys in refugees. We need to crack down on snakeheads and on bad immigration consultants who take people for a ride and steal their money. But we don't need to crack down on the families coming here to escape genocide or poverty or the other horrible things that are going on in the world. We need to have open arms. We want also to speed up our immigration system. We shouldn't be jailing people, when they're coming for a year, that's for sure, for refugees. We need to speed up our immigration system so they can bring family members over. I know a lot of refugees who had to wait 4 or 5 years to see their children for the first time because their wife was pregnant when they escaped. This is wrong. We also need to make the whole immigration system more fair and transparent, so people don't have to wonder why more people get in from Eastern Europe and Western Europe than from racialized countries where they face much longer waiting times.
Good, thank you. And Triffin, if we go to you next, please.
This is an issue that we'll see more and more as time goes on with climate crises that we're facing. There will be more people coming and knocking at our door. One of the things we believe in the Green Party, and I believe, is that we certainly don't throw somebody in jail when they knock on our door and ask for our help. We need to assist these people. We need to take measures that ensure that, first and foremost, these things don't happen. Prevention is the key to everything. And also, a lot of these people are coming from war-torn countries, countries that are basically starving. One of the ways that we could stop this immigration is by actually feeding the people there so that they don't have reasons to fight. The root of all wars, ladies and gentlemen, is hunger. And if we can alleviate the hunger that exists within humanity, then we will do we will pay a big debt towards these countries that are in war because they are hungry. So one of the things that we would do is ensure that these countries, these nations that are facing turmoil are better suited, and they don't actually require the assistance. So prevention is the key, and certainly when they do arrive at our doorstep, we welcome them as good people do.
Thank you. Paul, over to you for your response, please.
Well, first and foremost, we have been, even during the economic downturn, we've invited more immigrants to this country than ever before in our history, because we understand as a government that that type of diversity is important to Canada, and that immigration is very important to Canada. But let's talk specifically about refugees. We brought in last June what was called the Balanced Refugee Reform Bill. It was something that we worked together on in Parliament. It received unanimous support of not only the Conservative, the Liberal, the NDP, and Bloc members. We worked on it together in the Immigration Committee. It was one of the proudest moments that I've had in Parliament. What we did is we sped up the refugee process. We added an appeal to it so that when people came to this country, they could have their hearings done quicker. They could know whether they're proceeding towards landing status, so that you don't have this instance where people are here 10 years, they start to establish life, and then all of a sudden they're told that their claim is not being heard. So we welcome over 40,000 people a year who declare refugee status in Canada, and we process them as quickly as we possibly can. We are the most generous country in the world. I will challenge one thing in the premise of the question. We are not reducing family reunification. We've actually increased it even despite the global downturn.
Thank you. And Louis.
We will uphold our international obligation to refugees, as we are the signatories to that act. Number two, we will increase the family reunification, repatriation, as the Conservatives have decreased it. And we will also, when I was on the Immigration Committee 204 to 206, we went across Canada to find out what are some of the issues about family reunification. And the biggest challenge people had was with the definition of a family. What people said to us was the definition of a family that is in the Act is too restrictive. It does not include parents or grandparents. And we all know parents and grandparents are part of the family. And it does not include children that are over the age of 22, which we must change those rules and include those children as well.
Thank you. The fifth question relates under the heading of the military, and I'll ask Tristan to begin, followed by Paul, and then by Louis. And here's the preamble of the question. The first settlers of the villages of Markham and Stouffville were Mennonites from Pennsylvania. They and the many Quakers who also pioneered in this riding were people of peace who came to Upper Canada critical of early American militarism. Many of the people in this room are descendants of these first pacifist settlers. We know from our international relief work that security preparedness involves more than military capacity. It includes adequate funding for development, democracy promotion, disarmament, and diplomacy. Currently, Canadian government security spending has weighted heavily towards military defense, while projected non-military expenditures on diplomacy and development are frozen or being reduced. This is a concern to many of the churches. Here is your question. How will your party work towards a vision of international peace? Triffin, we begin with you.
One of the first things we would try and do as a party, and what I would try and do as a candidate, is to ensure that we continue on our path having a role as peacekeepers. We've somehow lost that role as peacekeepers, and we've become peacemakers. Well, peace cannot be made through the barrel of a gun. What we need to do is ensure that these places that we go to receive our humanitarian aid. We need to be investing not in bomber jets that end up bombing people, but we need to invest in seeds so that we can start feeding these people. Because that's why we're in turmoil in the first place. We need to send doctors to help heal the wounds of these people that are suffering from being shot at. We need to send educators to ensure that they learn the democratic process. And first of all, we need to ensure that we as proud Canadians go there to assist people and not to force them into things that they're not used to knowing about.
Thank you. Paul, we have your response, please.
We're going to continue to work with the international organizations that Canada is a part of, including the G8 and the G20. We've had extraordinary success as a nation working through the Organization of American States to address some of the hemispheric challenges that we face over the last 2 years. We continue to work through APEC, because what we're finding is that when we work with the international community, we can actually solve. So we can have a big role in solving some of the problems that the world faces. We talked about the Millennium Development Goals and how Canada is going to continue to participate in funding those initiatives. But of course, we're going to also reinvest in the Canadian forces, because we know that often it's the Canadian forces who are going to be called upon to assist around the world, be it in peacekeeping or even closer to home. When this earthquake struck in Haiti, it was the Canadian forces who were the first Navy to be deployed, who made it to Haiti. It was the Canadian military and the Air Force who were able to evacuate Canadians from the danger zone, who were able to bring down our disaster assistance response team to clean the water, to provide medicine, and to provide food. So we should be very proud of what the Canadian forces can accomplish when we have a force that is able and ready to respond. In Afghanistan, we're building roads and bridges through the Canadian forces. We're securing those investments. We're seeing women and children go back to school. So we're accomplishing a lot by reinvesting not only in the Canadian forces, but by working with our international partners to make sure that Canada's sovereignty is protected not only at home, but also abroad.
Thank you. And Louis, your response, please.
As many of your grandparents came here fleeing from hardship and not so much democracy in other places, my parents came here for to flee from fighting every 5 years, every 10 years, and having problems. We didn't come here, my father told us, to fight. We came here for the peace. So we're not going to be investing billions of dollars in fighter jets that are single source. We'll look around and make sure we get a good deal, and we'll make sure that fighter jets that are required in the future will be the ones that are not for offensive moves, but for defensive action. The other thing is we will restore funding to development, democracy, disarmament, and diplomacy. I was in Bosnia and I watched a demonstration of taking mines, demining, and it's not a pretty sight, far away from your home, but it was done in somebody's backyard. So when it's in your backyard, it really strikes home.
Thank you. John, please.
Well, what our party believes is that in order for our country to actually be, promoting international peace is, we actually need to know what the mission we're actually getting ourselves into is. We actually need to know, and what our party believes is the best way to actually ensure we actually have international peace is to make sure that we stay in our traditional peacekeeping role. And what we actually think is that the purchase of the F-35 fighter jets is actually us going away from that traditional role that's actually made Canada actually great, and that's one of the reasons why people actually came here, because we actually differ from the United States. We need to make sure that our country actually stays away, and a lot of young people are also getting turned off because, for politics, because our country used to be like, a voice for peace. And that's another important thing, is that Canada actually lost a seat on the Security Council because a lot of countries are being threatened by Canada and our change in our actual traditional role. So what I think is the best way for Canada actually to regain its supremacy is for us to go back to our traditional role, which has actually been peacekeeping, and I think that will actually gain Canada a lot of prestige on the international stage. That's what I think Canada should actually be doing. We just actually make sure that we actually find out what role we're actually getting ourselves into and actually stay in our traditional peacekeeping role. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And Janice.
When our World War I veterans and our World War II veterans were still alive in large numbers, the theme for Remembrance Day was never again. That's how I was brought up. A war doesn't solve anything. And I think, what has it been, 10 years, 8 years now in Afghanistan, propping up tribal leaders who are torturers, pedophiles, rapists. For some reason, that just isn't working to make the world safer for democracy. War can't solve anything any more than me beating my child is going to make them stop hitting their sister. This isn't an answer. I think we all know that. The NDP is the only party that says, let's just bring our soldiers home, okay, and let's take care of them, give them disability benefits, not lump sums, give them training, give them adjustment. My father suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder almost his whole life. We need to take care of people when they come back from doing this service for us. But we also need to replace them with civilian development programs that focus on women and children, that focus on regional diplomacy, working with peacemakers from all nations to try and find compromises and move ahead. The scariest thing in our last 5 years, last 10 years, is that war has become a private enterprise worth a lot of money. There's a lot of interest in not ending it. It's not just weapons anymore, it's logistics and it's decision making, all privatized.
Thank you. Okay, question number 6. We're hitting the home stretch. You're doing very well. Question 6 is on the topic of prisons and corrections.